Hello, everyone. Greg Sykora here with Mark Zavitz. Today, we're going to talk about CPP. Some interesting information on CPP, what CPP1 and CPP2 are, some changes that are coming down the CPP pipeline that help lower income Canadians, and my general thoughts on what's going on at CPPIB, which is the institution that manages CPP. Let's get started. It's a little blurry. Of course, for a long time, we've heard about CPP. Well, what is CPP? As a reminder, it's easy to forget that CPP isn't just a retirement pension. It provides income for persons outside of a normal pension. In addition to being an income stream you tap into at retirement, it also provides payments for younger Canadians with severe lifelong disabilities. Provides benefits to children of parents who have those disabilities as well under the age of 18, or if they're in school between the ages of 18 and 25. There's also the add-on death benefit, which typically pays around $2,500. It can pay up to $5,000, which covers funeral food costs and the after party. How is it funded? Well, basically, CPP is a very big pension plan funded by Canadians. Up until 2024, there was only one CPP funding mechanism, but now CPP is broken down into two parts. CPP1, the first original part, takes almost 6% of your income, up to $74,600 as of this year, and contributes that amount into a pension plan on the side. Additionally, your employer matches that amount for almost a 12% total contribution. CPP2, which launched 2 years ago in 2024, it's an additional tier of contributions for income between $74,600 as of this year and $85,500 that takes 4% of your income between those amounts and contributes it into the fund. Your employer matches the other 4% as well. What's new regarding this? Well, the good news is that these amounts have been ramping up over the last, we'll call it 5, 6, 7 years. The Carney government is taking a closer look at this and is trying to reduce CPP1 contribution percentage amounts over the next couple of years. I think they've already passed legislation that's going to make it come down around 0.1, 0.2%. which were some of the amounts it increased over the last couple of years, kind of roll back some of the amounts, which I think overall is a good thing because it puts pressure on CPPIB to deliver performance to meet its pension funding obligations. Mark, you had some good points when we were kind of debriefing ahead of this presentation about CPP funding. What are your thoughts?
Well, you're going to talk about some of this, but certainly the contribution level for Canadians in the Canada Pension Plan, CPP, is significant. As you just mentioned, it's almost 20% between employee and employers on the first $85,000 of income per individual, working individual. And that's significant. The good news, perhaps maybe the only good news, is that Canada Pension Plan is one of the few pensions in the world that is currently fully funded to include indexing, and theoretically funded for 75 years. So that's the positive. Because the contribution level is so significant, and it's been significant for years, well, since inception, there is enough money in the pot to pay people for the next 75 to 100 years. That's the positive. You can go over some of the downfalls.
Yeah. I mean, we'll cover some of that in 2 or 3 slides from now. All right. So now on to some cool stuff. We get this question all the time. When should I take CPP? Well, like everything when it comes to financial decisions, it depends. Here's a calculator that's free to use online. I'm going to link it in the email blast that goes out with the link to this video. I found it a few years back. I still use it from time to time with clients when it comes to making this decision. And I will just demonstrate it right now and show you some cool stuff. Pull it up. Screen. All right, so here's the URL if you want to do a Google search or if you want to click on the link in the email I just sent. It says financialcalculators.net, steady hand, CPP take early. This is the best free calculator I found online that's the easiest to use and understand. You can see the inputs and what they deliver in this little graph chart thing down here. Typically, the decision that comes up most is trying to determine, should I take CPP early or should I defer it to age 65? But I'll just start at the top here. Most people are trying to decide if they're going to take CPP around, 58, 59 years old. That's when, you're 59, you get your first letter from the government about taking CPP, the amount of contributions that have come in. And so if you've made it this far, you're 59 years old, you get that letter, and you are trying to figure out, okay, am I going to take CPP or not? And you're not talking to Mark or I. You should use a calculator like this, but you should also take into consideration, if you're in good health, how long you're going to live. So if you've made it to 59, when Mark and I get actuarial reports from the insurance companies and from the financial planning board, if you've made it to 59, or usually it starts at 60, but if you've made it to 59, 60 years old, odds are you are going to live to about 88 if you're in good health. So if you take that into consideration, that has an effect on the crossover periods for taking CPP early versus deferring it to a later date. So if you're making a decision, we're going to stick around 59, 60 years old. If you're making a decision at 59, odds are if you're in good health, you're going to live until you're 88. Okay, so set the bar at 88. Then you can play around with the calculator and choose when it is you want to start CPP. You can choose anywhere from 60 to 70 years old. Okay, so let's just say the first decision you have to make is 60. If you wanted to compare it to, say, taking it at 65, you would set the parameters as such, starting it early at 60 versus waiting until the normal age of 65. 60 is considered early. There is a benefit reduction amount, but then again, you get to enjoy that benefit early. So the benefit reduction amount is 0.6% a month times obviously 12. So it's around 7.4% a year times 5 years. Okay. So that's what you're giving up. Don't worry too much about this inflation rate. But the main variable to consider, and this is the opportunity cost variable, is the rate of return. For those that are invested with us, the rate of return you should use, if you're in the conservative model, which is about a third to 40% of all of our clients, is around 4%. Okay. This is a net return after fees, after tax. The conservative model is probably going to deliver around a 5% return over a full market cycle, but then you need to consider tax, the average amount of tax you're going to have to pay on that return. If it's in a non-registered account, your average normal tax rate is probably going to be around 20%-ish for the average person or earning an average income. So that means your net after tax return is going to be around 4%. That leads to, don't worry about this because this doesn't change anything. It just changes the y-axis here. That means that the crossover period between taking it early and taking it at 65 is around age 74, 75. What if you're higher risk? What if you're in the moderate model? The moderate model, which is 60, 65% equity, is probably going to deliver a return net after fees, net after tax of around 5%-ish. Well, that pushes the crossover period up just a little bit to 75, 76. What if you're in the growth model? Let's push that up a little bit further. 76, 77. And if you are one of the few clients that is higher risk, you're in the equity model, probably going to get an 8.5% return. Got to consider some tax. Let's just make that a bit more conservative there. 77, 78 is the crossover period. Okay.
Greg, could you explain why that higher rate of return affects a longer crossover? What's happening with the early money that you're taking from CPP?
The early money that you're taking CPP is instead of coming out of your retirement portfolio, stays compounding in your retirement portfolio instead. So you're taking less from the pool with us, and you're taking money from CPP instead. So that pool with us gets to enjoy a higher rate of return depending on the risk tolerance of the portfolio, and that's determined by your goals, objectives, and is subjective to how you feel about risk. So if you're higher risk, then obviously the crossover period is longer because your portfolio is enjoying a better return. If you're lower risk, the crossover period comes at an earlier time frame. It comes around 72, 73. The other big decision usually comes at so if you get to this period of life, you're 59 years old and you're making that decision, there's nothing to really consider from a health standpoint. Maybe you have some biases and you're like, everyone in my family passes in their late 70s, and yeah, maybe taking it early makes sense. The other decision to consider is taking it at 65, which is the normal age to take it, or deferring it to a later date. Again, we have to consider the risk level of your portfolio because the same return scenario affects the crossover period for when you should take it. Okay, so at age 65, which is the decision time for a lot of other retirees who haven't taken it early, what if we defer to age 70? Well, if we're in the conservative model, the crossover period typically happens around 82, 83. But what if we are in, say, the moderate model? We've got a higher risk tolerance. The crossover period happens 84, 85. What if we're in a more growthier mix where the expected return after tax, after fees and everything, then the crossover period doesn't happen until much later. And what if you are gung-ho crazy equity person, which we have like one or two clients? There is no crossover period. It doesn't happen before life expectancy. Actually, it happens around age 90. If I move the end age to age 90. All that means is if you are choosing to take less from your portfolio, let's just say you're in a moderate portfolio mix, you're choosing to take less from your portfolio is going to enjoy more return. The crossover period for this money doesn't happen until age 85. There is a crossover period of benefit. So, of course, deferring does have a net benefit, but it puts you in a tough spot where you kind of are ambiguous to what you choose to do. In that case, it's kind of like a roll of the dice. And if you don't need the money, then it doesn't really matter what you do because your portfolio is going to enjoy this decent return because you're taking less from your portfolio because you're taking it early. And who really cares? Maybe you just want to take it. In that case, maybe taking it makes the most amount of sense. Then we take a look at other factors, gifting. We take a look at inheritances. We take a look at all this. There's other variables that go into this. But just using the straight line calculation, it really doesn't matter too much. This benefit isn't substantial. It's like, $7, $8,000. This grand scheme of things. Maybe your tax level maybe you're going to inherit a whole bunch of money, your tax bracket's going to shift up, in which case it doesn't make sense to defer it. We just want to take it early, okay? I use Conquest when it's more complicated, which is the financial planning tool for clients like you, and that will give us a more accurate picture in terms of what we should do. This is what I used to use almost all of the time before. I still kind of use it if we just want to isolate the discussion, because it's still a very useful, I think, tool. And if you ever want to play around with a calculator yourself, this is what I suggest doing as a DIY, tool for someone who's trying to make a decision. Any thoughts, Mark?
Oh, just that, Greg, this is very opportune to talk about because it's very confusing. Almost everybody that thinks about this and tries to figure out, when do I take it? Um, it's difficult because there's so many variables. Like you said, it depends if you need the money. Most importantly, it depends on your health. If
Yes.
you've got extremely good health and longevity in your family, that might be one reason, to wait. But and certainly if your health is poor or weak, or your parents and grandparents, God forbid, but died of heart disease or whatever, passed away in their 60s and 70s, then the incentive should be to start Canada Pension as fast as you can at age 60 and either spend the money or invest it so that you can have it privately and you can spend that private money or pass it on to your kids or grandkids.
Exactly. Well
The
said.
other, but like you said, Greg, there's so many variables. It depends how much people make. It depends on their tax level, their income level from other assets when they get to
Yeah.
retirement. There's just so many variables. That's why it's so confusing.
Yeah. And, just to throw some scenario, a scenario out there, basically, I've done work like this before. Then all of a sudden, right before retirement, the client gets a large lump sum inheritance, and we load up, their RRSPs, we load up their tax-free savings accounts, and all of a sudden the tax calculation that went into the back end of things, like we kind of knew there was going to be an inheritance coming, but we didn't say expect this much, changes. And the back end tax rate that they're going to be paying, instead of it being 20%, ends up being like 35% because they've got an extra $900,000 of capital, and 200 grand of it is in RSPs that they didn't have before. Anyway, it's just there's so many things to consider. The robust tool that we use is Conquest Financial Planning software that really allows us to give an accurate forecast and make an accurate decision for clients. But the reason why it's so hard is because also with all these variables, it matters, but it doesn't at the same time. Like you're not really going to go too far wrong if you decide to like take it early and you live until you're 89 years old. Like you're not going to be penalized too badly, and I think that's the bottom line. Regardless of the decision you make, it's not a horrible decision either way. Okay, you're going to be okay. It's meant to be a hard decision because all decisions are probably okay in the long run.
Agreed.
Back to when I go back. Oh, go back here. All right. So some thoughts. Well, as most of you know, given how your money is managed, we don't believe that active management and expensive money managers are worth it and can beat the market in the long term, which is why we lowered your portfolio fees and we moved clients like you into passive low fee strategies. The evidence doesn't support it. And so far, it's working from a performance standpoint. Our portfolio performance is top decile for all clients and all models, just as I kind of thought and knew it would be. On that same note, in that same vein, CPPIB has gone in a different direction over the last 15 years. They've loaded up on active strategies, opening up expensive offices across the globe, hiring expensive hedge fund managers and money managers, bloating up staff to run components of the pension plan. The size of the fund is around 800 billion today, making it one of the largest in the world. Mark said it's very well funded, but their management fee, which is very tough to decipher, some journalists like Andrew Coyne have tried to figure it out. They've estimated it to be somewhere in the ballpark today of around 1.25% to 1.5% expense ratio. Your portfolio, on the other hand, sits around 0.25%, not including the fee Mark and I charge from a service standpoint. So you're paying a quarter point for management. CPPIB, with all of their CFAs and PhDs and everyone they hire all their staff and overhead and bonuses they pay, is 1.5%. The exact opposite of where we're coming from and what the evidence supports. Every year they publish their performance and their results. Almost every year over the past 15 years, they've underperformed. The last time they outperformed was in 2022. The last time before that was in 2018. They only tend to outperform when markets get choppy. But the reason why they outperform isn't because they're geniuses at playing defense. It's because they own assets that aren't regularly valued. They aren't what's called mark to market. And that makes up around 40 to 45% of the entire pension plan. So assets like toll roads, office buildings in Malaysia, drug patents, they own patents, private debt, stuff you don't regularly get a valuation on or a price update on. That stuff makes up a huge chunk of the portfolio. So when there's big market movements, that stuff doesn't get priced sometimes for 6, 12 months, or sometimes even longer. It takes like 2 or 3 years to get an update from a body that can actually provide a valuation. So then it takes a while for that underperformance or for those asset classes that are underperforming in the moment for it to work its way through the pension plan. And right now, the big underperformance that's working its way through CPP is real estate. It's commercial real estate and all these shitty, excuse my language, real estate deals that are, showing up on the books, basically. Anyway, the thing that really irks me, and more recently in the last month or so, there's reports that have been coming out in the Toronto Star, National Post, Globe and Mail, being highly critical of CPP and what they've been doing. There's a report that's really literally just came out that surfaced that says CPP has retroactively gone back and started changing their benchmarks so that they can pay their underperforming offices basically these massive executive bonuses. And these executive bonuses are coming mostly from the funding of CPP2 that came out in 2024, which really came out of the 2022 market, correction that we saw, which showed like a 1 in 50 chance that CPP is going to be underfunded. Like they run these Monte Carlo simulations where they show these things. So all of a sudden, the Trudeau government said, okay, well, then we need to add in this other tier. And then, a year or two later, we're back to being fully funded for 100 years and we're okay. And what they've been doing is they changed the benchmarks with this new funding that's coming in, and now they're paying their executives retroactive bonuses. It's insane. So instead of making my opinion is instead of making Canadians contribute more, perhaps we should be scrutinizing what the hell is going on with this potential shortfalls and all this money that's going into CPP that we're forced. Instead of it's not really a tax, but instead of forcing higher contribution amounts, like it's a good idea, but there's not enough oversight. Like we need to be taking a closer look at these things. There's too much bureaucracy. So, this was a bit of a negative tangent. Here's the bottom line. It is a societal benefit as Canadians. Fraser Institute 10 years ago came out and said the average Canadian that enjoys CPP at 65 lives until life expectancy. You're basically getting a 5% return on what you contribute. This was 10 years ago. I couldn't find anything that was more recent, but I think I heard it's around the same number now. It's properly funded. Lower income Canadians, it's a real boon for them. This is almost half of their income when you consider things like ODSP, for example, plus this. Disabled Canadians, they cycle 100% of this money back into the Canadian economy, okay? And that just means, and it's taxable for them, that just means it isn't lost, okay? Part of what makes us Canadian is helping our fellow Canadian out. This is it. All the studies that go into all these countries that have higher tax rates, the Scandinavian countries, Germany, for example, that are implementing societal universal basic personal incomes, this is kind of sort of that. In some ways, the people are happier, they live longer, there's less crime. It's what makes us Canada. Okay. But at some point, this good idea, I think, has gone a little too far. And we really need to take a closer look at how this fund is being managed, because it's not being managed well, in my opinion. And I think some people are starting to catch on to what's going on there and how they're using the money. And especially with the inclusion of CPP2 and the increase of CPP contributions that happened over the last 3, 4, 5 years, that rollout that happened in 2020, 2021, over a 4 or 5 year period, it's all happening right now. And we're fully funded. What the hell's going on here? We need to take a closer look at this stuff. Mark, any closing thoughts or remarks?
No, I just, I want everyone to just to make sure that they understand that the fund is safe. The fund is maybe too safe, but the fund is safe. It's fully funded. Don't ever need to worry. What we need to do, as Greg said, is the management fees are too expensive, way too expensive. The performance is not good enough because of perhaps some of the asset mix. And so, as Greg said, this is a very large fund. What is it, Greg? 800 billion?
It's 800. It's so the last report that came out in January showed it was at 787 billion, and I just guessed it's probably around 800 billion today.
All right. Well, it's worth scrutinizing. There's no reason that a fund that large should be operating with a 1.25% or 1.5% management fee. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, and they get all these advantages as well. Like, if these guys were on Bay Street, they would have been fired 10 years ago. But they have the advantage of having a continuous amount of money flowing into them. It's like most managers have to worry about underperforming and then having their unit holders or shareholders take money out. And then they have to worry about what to sell next, not what to buy next. These guys are only worried about what to buy next. So they've just gone on buying sprees. And when they can't figure out what to buy next, they pay themselves big bonuses. It's kind of, it's gone too far. And anyway, one last thing I forgot to mention is the Carney government did roll out the IDEA platform, working with the CPP administrators at the federal level and provincial levels. One way to make it less of a stressful decision for Canadians who are trying to choose between taking CPP early and later, some increase to the CPP death benefit for CPP survivors or the estates of CPP survivors, where if someone qualified for CPP but instead decided to defer it and died during the CPP eligibility phase, that they would receive some sort of like lump sum or a stream of income that they would enjoy, or their estate would enjoy, or the beneficiary of their estate, the survivor, would enjoy over time. And I think it's going to happen and get implemented in the next year. So that's pretty good news. It's like an added survivor benefit for CPP that we didn't really talk about, the survivor benefits and the crossover periods for survivor. It gets way too complicated if we do. But basically, making the decision even easier for us to make, and making it so that if you're worried about taking it early, about dying prematurely, dying early, even though you're 59 years old in good health, or 64 or 65 in good health, that you don't have to worry about that. Your state doesn't have to worry about it. Your spouse doesn't have to worry about it if you have a spouse, and it really levels that decision out. Okay, thanks so much for listening to our update. Appreciate it, guys. We look forward to presenting our next monthly update, and we'll see you next month. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, Gregory.